Good morning and welcome you all to this third episode of our Food Innovation Talk. In Danish Food Cluster, we have been looking very much forward to this third episode. My name is Thomas Jacobsen and I'll be your host today. If you have any questions during this episode, please send them to us directly. You can fill in the form right next to the video. Today we'll be talking about blockchain. It is a technology with a lot of talk, but how can it be used? That will be the topic for today's episode. And we have moved to IBM's Client Center in Copenhagen. And I'm very glad to welcome you to Jan Lillelund, Chief Technology Officer at IBM,
yes,
to share your knowledge on this topic.
Thank you for having me.
And to begin with, I'd like to ask you very briefly, can you introduce blockchain to all of us?
I can try. It's a very large subject, but briefly, blockchain is about ledgers. Ledgers is key in all kinds of business, and they're certainly not new. We have been using them for double entry bookkeeping since 1494, and the commercial usage of this principal book of account in a business is key to all of the transactions that we conduct in and out of businesses. And the important thing is here, it is the system of record for recording asset transfers in and out of business. However, the problem with ledgers is that this is a before picture as we know it. Each participant keeps their own ledger. They record their business transactions as they occur, and each does that for their own business. And the problem with that is that one, it's very expensive. We are keeping, each company is keeping a bookkeeping organization for their part of the network, if you want. It's also very inefficient as the business conditions, the contracts that govern these transactions are duplicated by every network participant. And it's also vulnerable. And the reason for that is that if a central system, for example, a bank, is compromised due to an incident, this affects the whole business network. Incidents can include fraud. They can include cyber attacks or maybe just simple mistakes. Anyway, blockchain is a novel way of approaching this ledger setup. And the blockchain architecture gives participants the ability to share a ledger, which is updated every time a transaction occurs, and it is replicated throughout the network through peer-to-peer replication. Cryptography is used to ensure that the network participants only see the parts of the ledger that is relevant for them, and that the transactions are secure and authenticated and verifiable. Blockchain also allows the contract for asset transfer to be embedded in the transaction. And that means that the conditions under which the transaction occur is following the transaction and is executed automatically as the transaction events occur. And fourthly, network participants agree on how transactions are verified through a mechanism called consensus. And that is also governed by government oversight. We have compliance and audit can also be part of the network. But the important thing here is that the participants are the same as before. So there is not a disintermediation play in place here. What we're trying to do is create transparency among many other things. And just to sum up, if we look on the requirements of blockchain for business, what we're having here is a shared ledger, which everybody has, which makes it robust also towards data loss and error. We have smart contracts which are embedded into the transaction database and executed with the transactions. So there is never any ambiguity as to what rules governs a special transaction or an individual transaction. We have privacy on top of that. The cryptography ensures that we do not have clarity in the sense that people not involved in a transaction can freely access the information. So only the participants know exactly what's going on. But what is very important, and especially in the topic we're covering today, we're talking about trust. So because the transactions are endorsed by relevant participants, we are creating a network of trust. And this is something that is the foundation for the transparency, which is entirely new, and which we are introducing with this technology, and especially in relations to food and food safety.
And you're slowly starting with the next thing, but how is this interesting for the food sector?
Well, exactly. If we look at the food sector, we see every year 1 in 10 people falling ill. We see a staggering number, 420,000 people dying due to contaminated food. And many of the critical issues that are impacting food safety, such as cross-contamination, the spread of foodborne illness, unnecessary waste, and not to mention the economic burden of recalls, are magnified by the lack of access to information and traceability. So it can take weeks to identify the precise point of contamination, and that can cause further illness, but also loss of revenue and wasted product. And here it took, in this example here, we have papayas, and the papayas gave rise to a 2-month search for the salmonella infection that they were affected by. And this creates a huge problem. And to give you an example, why do we need blockchain in food safety? Well, look at spinach. In 2006, we had an E. coli outbreak in spinach, and which caused in the United States 3 deaths, and we had 199 cases of people being hospitalized. And it took more than 2 weeks to find the source. And as it turned out, it was only one supplier with one lot during one day sending out contaminated spinach. However, spinach was more or less removed from the American market because of this. And spinach growers were incredibly impacted by this. And if you look at the economy of it, it took them 6 or 7 years just to recover and regain the same turnaround as they had prior to this incident. So this was back in 2006. If we look now, 12 years later, not much has changed. And I don't expect you to read all of this. It's just excerpts from newspaper clippings. But in April 21st of this year, we saw an E. coli case in lettuce, in romaine lettuce. And it took until May 3rd to find the source of the contamination. So have we learned nothing? Well, we're certainly challenged by it. And what we're trying to do is trying to deal with this visibility problem that we have across the supply chain. Because like the slide I showed you before on the generic blockchain network before picture, this is how the food network looks today. We have individual distributor and producers and wholesalers and consumers and retailers and whatnot talking to each other on a one-to-one basis. And what we are doing now is creating on a blockchain a shared, replicated, and permissioned ledger which will give everybody the insight necessary to get to a clarity and a reaction time which is magnitudes faster than we've seen before. In an example I can give you is tracing a certain product back to its root takes a few seconds. And what's more, if you have an incident, for instance, with a retailer, and you want to see where it comes from, you can trace it back to the producer. But there's a second challenge, which is making the situation bad for people today, and which this solves in large part, is you also need to figure out who else got the food that is in question here. And you can do that equally fast when you have this kind of cooperation in a network. So what we've done is we've started to create the IBM Food Trust network. And the Food Trust network is a cooperation between some large players within the food industry. We have Wallmarte, Unilever, Nestlé, Dole. You can see the logos here. And together, they will help identify and prioritize new areas where blockchain can benefit food ecosystems. We will, with this, try to create better food safety. And it also draws from multiple IBM pilots and production networks in related areas. And I'll come into that a little bit later, but if I get the chance. But what we're trying to do here is to successfully demonstrate ways in which blockchain can positively impact global food traceability.
It seems like blockchain is interesting for the big guys, but could it be that smaller companies could gain advantages of this technology as well?
Certainly. If we look at the architecture of the Food Trust solution, obviously we are building on the IBM blockchain platform, which is a open source collaborative development environment onto which we build all our blockchain implementations. The Food Trust application we've built on top of this is a modular approach where we, in addition to data entry and access, there are two other modules that help improve food supply chain transparency for everybody. And it is the trace and recall, as you see here, where we manage recalls. We do recall post-analysis. We can also do the trace forward and back, like I mentioned before, but we can also do a recall simulator, i.e. what happens, or do these what-if cases where we dream up scenarios where we'd like to make sure that we have the right preparedness. We can do this in a recall simulator. We also have the certificate management. We have version control, authenticity, automated lifestyle management, and real-time sharing. And just to mention one of them, if we look at authenticity, I saw a report a few months ago on olive oil. So virgin olive oil in the EU, apparently they're sold 10 times the amount of virgin olive oil than is produced. And the EU does not import olive oil. So apart from being a good magic trick, if we can start creating authenticity and traceability on foodstuffs like that, we could create an upside for all the small producers of olive oil, for instance, so that they do not compete with all those that are basically selling something else, but also make sure that they get the right price, and also they have the ability to ensure towards consumers, and that is a value add, that their olive oil is actually theirs and people can see where it comes from. If I might give another example, this is S Group, and this is a cooperative, a Finnish network of cooperatives, and the SOK Corporation and its subsidiaries, where we're tracing food from capture to consumer. In this case, we're talking about the pike and the perch. And they have created the pike and the perch radar, and is in this sense within fishing pioneering this transparency. This is not something we haven't seen before. And to quote them, to start with, the application provides information about different fishing sites, but in the future, the customer will also be able to see where this comes from, i.e. you can go down into the supermarket and scan your fish and know exactly which fisherman caught it and where he caught it.
Yeah. So, if I understand it correctly, blockchain is about sharing information in a trusted environment.
Yes.
And I can bring a question from the audience into this as well. How can we integrate IBM blockchain to other blockchains like Stellar to keep track of food? Can blockchains collaborate?
Yes, actually, it's a very good question, and taking this slide here in context of that question, obviously we have this slide shows the engagements that we're currently doing, or at least an excerpt of some of the engagements that we're doing across the globe within a number of industries, and the food safety network is down here. But what is also very interesting is that we're starting to see a collaboration between the food safety and the supply chain and logistics work that we're doing here. So a few weeks ago, we announced the TradeLens platform, which is a platform for shipping. We now have, apart from Maersk, a number of large industrial harbors coming on board, as well as other shippers. And the whole ecosystem around shipping is beginning to adopt this platform. Well, food traceability ties very much into shipping. And for instance, if you're shipping papayas in a reefer container, you'd like to have information from this network into the food safety network, but you'd also like to tie this together so that you get the end-to-end traceability, so you know exactly what the grower is doing, but also what the shippers in the in the intermediate steps are doing, and then again the wholesaler and the retailer are doing, and here we see this cooperation coming together. But what's also wasn't very obvious from the beginning, but which is also very interesting, and that is trade finance. So a lot of international trade is encumbered by cost, by procedure. Various jurisdictions have various requirements for the transfer of money and financing. And we're also now seeing that trade finance is working with supply chain and logistics and also with the food safety network. So these three are now across blockchain, across three blockchains, exchanging transactions. So this is, we're seeing the contours of a network of networks. So instead of having one blockchain that fits everybody, for instance, like the Ethereum blockchain, we are creating blockchains that are specific for each of the platforms or each of the industries that require it. But we have also the interoperability in this to enable the transfer, the atomicity, maintain the atomicity of the transfer such that the value it represents are transferred from one blockchain to another and to a third and maybe back again when the circumstances dictate.
And I can bring another question in from the audience as well. Going back to looking at the blockchain within food.
Yeah.
Where do you see the strongest potential for blockchain technology in food production? And what are the most important barriers to get there?
Well, the strongest point is probably food safety right now. Yeah. So this is being really emphasized at the World Food Summit at the end of August. This was the core message: is better food for more people, and I think the Food Trust is core to this message. So, and that is also why we are focusing there right now. But there are also economic benefits on top of that, and some of the spin-offs are obviously being able to provide better information to your customers, being able to differentiate your product from others, more generic products, or for instance, the certification and the traceability enables you to give your customers a certainty which they haven't had before. And I know here in Denmark we have very high food trust and very few incidents of food contamination. But if you look globally, we can, for instance, turn to China and see that the trust in milk and especially baby formula is very, very low, such that Chinese travel abroad even to Denmark to buy baby formula because their own food safety and food traceability is not very good. So there are a number of aspects where this is going to improve. The difficulties is obviously getting a granularity in the chain. So you want from farm to fork to be the traceability through this to be as granular as possible. But even in these early stages where we have some big players and maybe some smaller players, but still have some holes in the chain, we still have a much higher insight and transparency that we would otherwise have. And even though it's work in progress, we're already now seeing the benefits from this.
Interesting. And if you should zoom out a bit, in 5 years' time, how do you expect the usage of blockchain in food?
Oh, that's a difficult one. So I think, stepping back, blockchain is going to do for everything of value what the internet did for information. And it's going to affect every industry that I can think of. If we turn to World Economic Forum, they have predicted that 10% of the world's GDP will be on blockchain by 2027. So you're asking where we'll be in 5 years? We will be seeing heavy adoption of blockchain for a number of reasons. In food, certainly because of transparency, but also in the reduction of cost of international trade, but also cost in recalls and cost in terms of lost revenue because of loss of customer faith. And how wide a penetration we'll have, my guess is we'll be looking at the majority of food producers and transporters within 5 years. Hopefully we'll also be having a very large penetration into the consumer retail space.
Interesting. And then it will be something for the consumers to grasp.
Yes. You will eventually be able to basically bleep your pork chops and get to know exactly how it was handled, whether the cold chain was intact, and who grew it, and was it organic or not, or is it organic or not. And I'm wondering if not some very creative people will be able to put some more service on top of that. Certainly regulators are interested in this, and also in making sure that we keep everybody honest. Not only when we're talking about olive oil, but we know of several cases throughout history that not only accidental contamination, but essentially deliberate food fraud has been a problem. And from government and regulatory side, we will probably see much more interest in this technology, as it will enable them to trace back much faster and much quicker the source of any fraud attempts.
Thank you. And once again, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge on this very relevant topic.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for watching this episode of our Food Innovation Talk, this time on blockchain. If you have any further questions for Jan on this topic, you can fill in the form right next to the video, and we will give you an answer directly via email. If you want to stay updated on news from Danish Food Cluster, you can sign up to our newsletter. Find it on the website. Otherwise, we'll see you at our next Food Innovation Talk on October 3rd, this time on food fraud. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this Food Innovation Talk by Danish Food Cluster. You can always visit our webpage for reviewing this Food Innovation Talk. Hope to see you soon, and have a nice day.